Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of Three Drams. We are here with episode 8. As always, I'm your host, Potstill Matt Healy from potstill.com, and I am joined by the owner, creator, Irish malt Three Drams extraordinaire, Mr. John. How are you doing? Welcome to your own show, I guess.
I suppose, Matt. Thanks very much. Show wouldn't be a whole pile without you, though. I don't think I'd be able to do as good a job as you. So I'm doing really well. I wanted to jump on and say hi. Can't believe we made it to 8 episodes already. Feels like yesterday we started up the subscription. I want to thank everybody who's coming on tonight, especially when the weather is so nice outside. So thanks for coming on to drink some whiskey with us. A lot of our Three Drammers catch up with the YouTube video later on. So if you joined us for the live show tonight, a big thank you from us.
Well, I think I'm seeing people coming through all over the world at the moment. As you said, right now my computer is telling me it's 16 and sunny outside, which is great. I see some people dropping in at the beginning saying it's strange to be so bright outside. And there's a grand stretch in the evenings. What a fantastic Irish phrase to go with some fantastic Irish whiskies. But it really is. I think the sunset here in North Dublin is going to be around 10:30, quarter to 11 tonight. So I'm looking forward. I have my ring light set up for the nice live streaming, and it feels very unnecessary with the bright light streaming through the window. Everyone in the comments, let us know where you're joining us from. We have Marissa coming in from Maynooth, which is fantastic. David Mara wants to know, can we start drinking yet? You're about to start drinking, Dave. Don't even worry about it. We have 3 fantastic whiskies. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about the lineup this evening?
Yeah, we got a wonderful lineup tonight. We start off with dram number 1, which is the first offering of whiskey from the guys up at Copeland Distillery. Tim McKee is going to be joining Matt shortly to sample the Merchant's Quay blended Irish whiskey. So we're excited about that. I suppose a bit of news in the whiskey world today. But a lot of you may or may not have heard, but it's out there now that Matt Darcy and Co. is coming under the Ecklinville Distillery umbrella. So Ecklinville Distillery is a fantastic distillery, which we've been doing a lot of business with for the last number of years, and we've really enjoyed it. Jarlath Watson of Ecklinville is going to be here to discuss their 10-year-old port, which, just to avoid any confusion later on, the same whiskey comes with this amazing presentation box. It's actually also available at a slightly lower price for anybody who doesn't want the presentation box. Michael McKeown, one of Matt Darcy founder. So we got a first here. We got 2 people coming on to represent Matt Darcy in the middle segment. And of course, number 3, Boann Distillery. Some really intuitive, innovative products come out of Boann, and this one is no different. This is the good, the bad, and the smoky. They even smoke the bottle for extra effect. So I'm sure head distiller Micheown Walsh will be able to talk all about that. But Matt coming up at number 3. So thanks very much to everybody who's coming on and choosing to drink a little bit of whiskey over the 35 degrees of temperature that's outside covering Ireland at the moment. Well, it's at least 35 degrees in Cork. I don't know what it's like in North.
Exactly. It's nice to have everyone here. As said, just before this, I was recording an episode of Potstill Radio, my podcast, and I was speaking to some folks over in Chicago, and it's bucketing rain and freezing cold over there. And I'm seeing also in the south of France and in Germany as well, there's a big rain shower. So it's lovely for the one time of the year that we have the nice weather here in Ireland. So I'm delighted to see that.
Definitely take it, Matt. We will definitely take it.
Exactly. So for everyone who's at home, this is episode 8. Your box, as always, the fantastic 3 Drams box. You will have your 3 little whiskey bottles here. Now, depending on your subscription, you may also have this fantastic little plinth. And of course, your tasting card, which slots nicely into the back of the plinth. We'll be drinking our whiskeys, as I said, intuitively 1, 2, 3. That sounds very obvious, but once we swapped it, so we just want to make sure that everyone's drinking the right one today. We are going to be having a great time talking through these whiskeys. Remember, guys, this is your chance to meet the makers and to ask the questions you want to ask about the brand. John, you always have some fantastic ideas and competitions and deals that go along with all the shows. And we'll talk about some of those things later on as well. But if you are going to put anything on social media tonight, do remember that whether you're putting on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, do either tag 3Drams or hashtag 3Drams with the full spelling of the word 3. And we'll make sure we'll be able to find you guys there and share the love of Irish whiskey around the world. John, anything else you want to drop on us before we jump into our first whiskies of the evening?
Not a whole pile, Matt. Just wanted to come on and say thank you to all the guys who've been coming on every month and enjoying what we're doing. We do put a lot of effort into it. We have to, in the background, we have to work with 3 different distilleries in terms of getting the minis bottled, the commercial terms, the deliveries, the bottling. It's quite a lot to fit into a 4-week window. So behind the scenes, a lot of work goes on. So I did want to just actually come on and really just say thank you to all our kind of loyal customers at Irish Malts and at 3Drams. So as always, Matt, as well, later on in the show, we'll some weeks we have exclusives, or some months we have exclusives. This is one of the months where actually all 3 whiskies afterwards in their 70cl format. So there's an offer which will come out on all the brands later on in the show. So and
of course, that is a reminder that all those offers are only available to people that have subscribed to this month's 3Drams tasting kit. So make sure to check your emails if you are a subscriber after the show. And usually, John, you're pretty good. You'll drop that in people's inboxes, usually just before the end of the show or just as the show ends. So it's a great time to keep an eye on it.
All right.
But yeah, fantastic, John. I'm going to kick you off and say sayonara. And thank you again for organizing and creating 3Drams and Irish Malts. So thank you.
No problem. Very nice to support the community. All right, Matt, talk to you in a while.
Talk to you then. All right, guys. As I said, we're going to have a fantastic evening drinking some fantastic Irish whiskies. 3 whiskies from across the country with 3 very different profiles and I suppose flavor profiles, as well as the blends, as the styles of whiskies that they are. I am really delighted to be jumping into Dram number 1. Now, this comes from the guys up at Copeland Distillery. This is a whiskey that I have been very excited about seeing coming to the market. Copeland is a distillery that I love a lot of the products that come from the distillery. So I am super excited to be welcoming Mr. Tim McKee of Copeland Distillery to the show. So Tim, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having us on. I will say 3 things. It was hard to drive past the pub coming down to the distillery when everyone was sitting outside in the sunshine. And excuse, I probably should have worn a hat due to the glare off my head beaming straight into everyone. But that's the joys of having a bald head. And just lastly, they are friends down the road, and congrats to heard the news today to the guys at Matt Darcy's heading over to Eckneville. The guys down in Eckneville, they're only a stone's throw from us, and even last year during COVID, we very much helped each other out during some tough times. So whilst we're all kind of in this business, we're all a big family. So it's it's great to hear. So yeah, just that's my intro.
Well, fantastic to hear. It's great to see a big co-opetition, I think, is the buzzword for the industry. But everyone I think is friends on and off the shelf. There's a lot bigger boys to be kicking off the shelves than each other. So it's great to see. So Tim, for the people at home, give us a quick brief on who you are and who Copeland Distillery are, and then let's jump into some absolutely delicious Irish whiskey.
Yeah, so I'll try and condense it as quick as I can because it is a very long story. But firstly, my name's Tim McKee. I'm the brand development manager for Copeland. I've been part of the company for around 3.5 years. The Copeland was started by Gareth Irvine around 5 years ago, and he was in Coleraine University studying business management, had to come up with a business model, and thought of the idea of bringing a premium based gin together with local County Down fruits. Fast forward a bit, Copeland was created, and he was a one-man band in a shed, making it, delivering it, marketing it for around nearly a year. Then I came along, took a punt, and started working with him. And kind of fast forward, Gareth's dream was always to have his own distillery. Copeland is named after the Copeland Islands, just off the coast of Donaghadee, with the name coming from all the smuggling that happened from going through from the mainland into the peninsula. It kind of works well, guys smuggling spirits and tobacco, named after a distillery. And we find an old building in Donaghadee, right on the harbour, that was about to get torn down. It was the old cinema. So this building I'm in dates back to 1915. And we took it on and developed it into our state-of-the-art distillery, but very much keeping the charm. Like the wall behind you, you can see there, a lot of this block goes back to kind of 1840s, 1850s, when they were rebuilding the harbour in Donaghadee. And we're here now. We've got quite a number of SKUs now. We've got 4 gins, 2 rums, and we've launched our blended Irish whiskey. We're also making as much new mixed spirit as these 2 lovely ladies can, either side of me. This is Betty and this is Hesse, named after Gareth's grandmothers. It's our wash still and spirit still. And so in a very condensed way, that's kind of where we're at. We're a very busy little distillery, and it's a lot of fun. We're a family here, and we've got about up to 10 staff now, and everybody is local, which is what Gareth always wanted as well. So we're busy, even considering what's going on in the world. So that's where we're at the moment.
Fantastic. As Connor Winters dropping in saying the stills look amazing. So a good backdrop to the tasting this evening. So the whiskey that we are trying this evening is your Copeland Merchant's Key, your blended Irish whiskey. Now I have a little sample bottle of it here. You can see the fantastic kind of eggshell blue label. Can you run us through, as I take out dram number 1 here, can you take us through what the whiskey is in terms of its makeup, its cask regimen, and what we'll be tasting?
Yeah, so as you might imagine, whilst we are a young distillery, the oldest whiskey that we have in here is around just over 2 years old. So therefore, we actually don't have any of our own whiskey available for sale. We're actually aiming that the first of our series will be released around 2024. Our distillers are very keen to bring out a blend, so we're very transparent about what the blend is and what we want it to be. So our distillers went down to work with Brian Watts down in the Great Northern Distillery to create this blend. It's very much an expression of what we're doing here in the distillery, and the flavor profile and the makeup. And it's for us it gets us into these conversations to tell people about the whiskey that we're making at the moment, which we can get into briefly after. It's a great whiskey, and we're really, really chuffed with it. The makeup is it's 3 whiskeys aged in 4 different casks. We have triple distilled malt aged in sherry, double distilled malt aged in bourbon, and then grain whiskey aged in virgin oak and rechar, 40% ABV. So whilst it's not at your higher percent ABV with those multiple casks involved, there's a lot of flavors going on, which really backs it up. On the nose, you've got a lot of sort of toffee apple, dark berries, vanilla, clove spice, biscuity, and sort of hints of cedar on the nose. The palates, again, you're kind of sort of honey, oak spice, and the orange peel coming through. I don't know whether I'm jumping the gun here. Has everyone started drinking it yet? Or
I'm going to say I have a little bit in my glass here, so I'm going to say sláinte to you, and I'm going to have a little sip as we go along.
Thank you. Cheers. Cheers to everyone watching. And then you're going to have a nice sort of dry toasted oak finish.
And I suppose when it came to creating the blend for the distillery, I suppose, was there what was the motivation behind the cask choices that you were making?
We're big fans of sherry down here. We've got I've actually, if I could turn the camera around, we actually have a beautiful big 500 liter sherry that's just arrived. But yeah, there was like rechar and bourbon and the virgin oak. It's it's kind of a lot of what we kind of use here. And that's really the concept that went into the blend, and they worked on a couple of different blends, and we're very, whilst we have our opinions, we always bring in people outside of the distillery to give them a taste and see how they feel. And the blend that we had selected, everyone absolutely loved it. So that's kind of really our, like if we have anything from bourbon, sherry, Pinot Noir, Pot's Heads, Port Pipes, all being aged at the moment in the distillery. So we could have added maybe more casks, but we didn't want to go too crazy. But we're very, very keen to use a variety of different casks in our whiskies, and that's why with this blend we didn't want to just specifically use, one cask, but to use multiple. And I think it does. I've sort of repeat myself, back it up with the, with the flavour coming through. Great sipping whiskey. It's also been really well received. I don't know, the IWSC awards, which are very well received awards. We just got our silver medal back for the Merchant's Key. Getting a silver medal with those guys is outstanding. Gold medals are very rarely handed out. So we're chuffed to bits that it came back a silver from them. And even just in the short period of time it's been going, it's been well received in the on trade and the off trade. In Belfast, it's getting slung out in a few whiskey sours and a few on quite a few whiskey menus in Belfast. So no, we're chuffed to bits with it, and it's a great talking point for our distillery and a different market for us to be in.
Absolutely. And is it available kind of internationally as well as domestically, or whereabouts would people be able to find this in the world?
Yeah, well, at the moment, Northern Ireland wise, it's pretty much across Northern Ireland. There wouldn't be anywhere that if someone reached out in Northern Ireland that we can direct them within sort of 10 to 15 miles, if not shorter. Internationally, it's where we are a small distillery, so at the moment it's very much kind of online. So with Irish malts is the guys to, if you're over on the mainland or in the south or further afield, that would be where it is. We've got a bit of distribution on the mainland, randomly in Birmingham. We've got a good distributor over there. He does quite a lot for us, but it's going to build. It'll take time for us. Like anything with a new SKU coming out, we don't have the kind of the powerhouse of the bigger guys just to kind of get it everywhere straight away. But that's the fun, and that's what sort of mine and Gareth's job is to get it out there and work hard and get feet in the ground.
Exactly, get that legwork going.
Yeah,
I'm seeing a lot of very very enthusiastic tasting notes coming through. People very much enjoying. Actually enjoying a lot of different aspects of it, but particularly the virgin oak on the grain. I think is bringing through a lot of very positive attributes in the flavor profile as well, which is the comments literally just coming through continuously as I'm reading this. People obviously having an affinity to this flavor profile. If you have an indication of what kind of price point you normally see this bottle on the shelves at.
Yeah, so again, it was something we would kind of worked hard on, that we wanted to make sure that it was, affordable, but it's obviously one of those things that we're have to work hard for everyone concerned. So we have it. It should be in and around the £32 mark, which we think is pretty bang on. And yeah, like again, it's been well received from a price point of view. That's it.
Fantastic. I'm seeing a lot of people here saying now that they're going to be buying it after the show, and more questions coming through on the price point, which is fantastic. And a raisin sweetness with a drop of water, which is brilliant. And then I suppose the wider profile, is there, you guys said you've got your gins and your rums. Is there kind of an expected time for release of Copeland's own whiskey, or is it very much a see how you mature kind of project?
Like we are 2024 at some stage in that year. Every time we do, we have our sort of our new make program built out through the year. So every time we do a certain type, whether it's our single malt or our peated or our pot still, we always fill a firkin just to see, because it obviously ages a lot quicker being a little 60 litre. So for us, we get to see how things are aging and see how it's going to end up. But yeah, 2024. That's our aim for the first release. We've got, we do have the 125 Reserve Club. So when Gareth signed a lease in the distillery, he was for 125 years, and we then released 125 single reserve casks for sale. It's done by a lot of other distilleries, but for us initially it was to sort of generate cash flow into the distillery, but then ended up being very much a community driven thing. So like I own a cask with my family. It's all very sort of family orientated, community. But again, it's helped us lay down. I think we've got about 5 casks remaining for sale, but that's 120 extra casks that we have now being aged. So yeah, 2024, we have a few. We're working with, we're really lucky. We've got a phenomenal wine merchant just down the road from us who is helping us within the wine regions to bring in some phenomenal casks. At the moment, it's actually not whiskey related, but we're finishing one of our rums in Premier 1 Grand Cru Bordeaux casks. But that will also come into factor into our whiskies down the line. So there's Gareth gives us all a very sore head trying to keep up with what he wants. There is casks arrive, like that sherry that arrived today, didn't know anything about it, and because Gareth saw it, bought it, wanted to bring it in and get whiskey into it at some stage. So, but he is a driving force. If there's anything to take away from Copeland and anyone listening, Gareth's 28 years old. He hasn't come from anything. He has built this up, from the ground up. And he works pretty much 7 days a week. Within that, then we all work really bloody hard because his drives us. It is tiring at times. You do enjoy your weekends when they come, but I'm delighted to be part of this little distillery and the expansion plans we have down the line. It's a lot of fun, and whiskey's just great crack. And it's so romantic. There's so much patience in it, and couldn't be more delighted for the future ahead for Copeland whiskey.
Fantastic. I have a question, probably last one we have here, is whether this blend is core range and here to stay, or do they need to be snapped up quickly?
No, it is core range. I could say, oh no, yeah, it's limited edition, get it now. But no, it is here to stay for the foreseeable. And yeah, so that, and again, it's one of those things where we hope people buy it, enjoy it, and buy it again and again and again. And I think that's what we wanted to create as well. We wanted to create a product that, we were, sort of was an expression of Copeland, but also something that everyone enjoyed and wanted to, to repeat buy and gift and talk about. And even just before I go, because it is part of our story, because we're all about stories of Copeland because of the history of Donaghadee. But Merchant's Quay, which is what it's called. If anyone knows Donaghadee or comes to visit, our harbour is absolutely humongous harbour for the size of the little town that it is. And it was actually the busiest port town in Ireland, even more so than Belfast, up until around 1860, because it was so close to Scotland. So I
think we might have lost him there at a pivotal moment in that story. But we will hopefully have him. Let's see if we can pop him back off for 1 second and we can bring him back on now. David dropping in saying he'd love to check out the distillery over the course of the summer. I'm with you on this one. It's a distillery that has been on my radar for quite a while, and I am very excited to be able to pop up, particularly the two stills, the three different styles of whiskey they're making. Again, you've got your double distilled malt, the peated malt, and then of course the pot still as well, going through a huge amount of variations when you've got the gins and the rums as well that they're making themselves. It's definitely something that I'd be excited to see. And I see Tim has been able to rejoin us here, Tim, and may have.
Sorry about that. It's Donaghadee. The Wi-Fi is terrible, and it literally clicked into Donaghadee free Wi-Fi for some apparent reason. I've no idea. So apologies. We're still trying to get the old fiber down here, but it's still copper at the moment. So.
That's very fair. If you want to finish up that story, you're the closest point between Scotland, and then we'll leave you away.
Yes, sorry. No, there's a lot of history here, and the Merchant's Quay is very much a nod to the harbour and all that history from spirits and tobacco and herbs and spices being brought from all over the world here. So that's very much the start of that. But other than that, look, thank you so much for having us on and being part of our journey, because we're only getting going when it comes to whiskey. So we've a lot more to make, and hopefully everyone watching can join us on that journey. And hope they enjoyed it. And thanks so much.
Not a problem. And to everyone out there, remember to keep an eye on your emails. Towards the end of the show, you'll see all of the links to purchase. If you were so inspired by Tim that you want to pick up a bottle of this, which I think many people will, make sure to check out that link to Irish Malts after the show. Tim, thank you so much. Very much appreciated. And I'm delighted to start welcoming our next guests. So in our next section of the show, we've dram number 2. We have the Matt Darcy & Co. 10-year-old port fast finish whiskey. And in this, I'm ecstatic to be able to invite two people onto 3 drams here for the first time in the same tasting. We have Michael McKeown, the founder of Matt Darcy and Company, and then Jarlath Watson, one of the founders of Ecklandville Distillery, who have just announced today that they will now be making a partnership with this brand and the distillery. So I say to you both, gentlemen, welcome to the show. How are we?
Hey, Matt. All good, yeah. All good. How's you?
Oh, very well, very well. Thank you. And Michael, what about you?
I'm very good. I'm just come back from switching off the broadband at Donaghadee when I heard that man, when I heard that claiming that Donaghadee was next to Belfast in size. No, Newry was ahead of Belfast until the 1820s. And
I thought Michael would have issue with that.
Donaghadee was not on the map, but I do favour him searching for the history. And we have a Merchant's Quay here, which is longer than the main road into Donaghadee and out again. But
well, I shan't dare to bring up rivalries when we have three fantastic whiskey makers from the north of Ireland. But
but what I would not do is contest the merits of his products, and I totally admire, and I'll have to say I'm jealous of the fact that they have got their distillery up and running at all, because I'm a victim of trying to open a distillery in the middle of a bustling city. And I'm going through for my next attempt now to get through building control, which I actually was already through building control a year ago. And then we acquired more land to make the proposition bigger, which meant I had to go back through building control, and I'm stuck still. So we haven't got turning a sod yet. But I'm very glad that we managed to get all our nuptials with Ecklandville completed in the last couple of weeks. We have been courting for about two to 3 months now. I tried to tell Jarlath that we could be at the altar inside a month, but Jarlath told me it was going to take much longer, and he was correct. Mm-hmm. So we eventually got through the nuptials in the last week. But my reason for wanting to get into a relationship with him is I grew up in the spirits trade and left at the age of 30. So I'm very aware of brands and how to break into markets. And I'm much more on that side of the business than I'd ever be on the product side. like what we're doing today, my father and my grandfather before that, my grandfather was buying Cumber whiskey in the 1920s and 30s and blending. And in the 50s and 60s, my father was buying Powers and Jameson. So I was always more on the marketing side of it. So my entree into this business is more from that marketing side. In fact, one thing I have to preface is I know I might not look at, and you're all supposed to say, wow, but I am now over my 75th birthday. And I shouldn't be doing these things. I should be in bed at this time of night. But the saying that comes into my head is an Irish saying is, there's no agent like an owl agent. So I am the owl agent that got himself involved in a young man's business. And we have been, over the last couple of years, we've been plowing away trying to get the permission for the distillery. Part of the issue to me was that have been in business all my life, but second part of my brain is I'm an historian. I've written 3 history books on local subjects, and I jumped into this to search the history and to commemorate the history. And as a part of that, I would not satisfy myself until I had found the actual distillery that had been long since forgotten about, covered over with other things. And I set myself to buy it. It took me 2 years to negotiate with the 3 sisters who owned it. Because some days 2 of them were talking to each other, and other days 2 of them were talking to each other, and no day were ever the 3 of them talking to each other. But eventually, after 18 months, 2 years, I managed to get the old distillery premises from them. And I'm going to try. I didn't want to send you loads of I didn't want to send you loads of slides, but that's what it looked like. So I'm horrible pictures there, but it's derelict, and we've cleared most of the site, and we're starting to build there. But I took the notion whenever a revival was going in the mid, 2014, 15. I was in another business with about 70 or 80 employees in it, and I had the opportunity. I sold it to my son, and thought I was retired, but I didn't want to retire really. I didn't want to be doing nothing. So I was having lunch with my wife one Sunday in a well-known pub here called Fitzpatrick's on the Cooley Peninsula, and it's full of Irish memorabilia. And behind my wife's head, there was a poster of Hand in Hand whiskey from Duncan and Alderdice of Newry. And I just looked over the top of her head and said, Carmen, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a distillery. No agent like an oil agent, had no idea how long it was going to take me. And I had this fanciful idea that, you know what, I never need to worry about selling this whiskey, because it takes us 2 or 3 years to get the place built. Then we'll start storing the whiskey. And sure, I'll be nearly 80 by that time. Somebody else will have to sell the whiskey. And I was taken out of my naivety by an older brother who had been in the spirit trade all his life. He came to see me and he says, you need to get the brand established now. Oh, I listened to him. And the last 3 years have been work, and work. We went out and we bought a large amount of old whiskies. Far too much for what we needed. But when you're afraid of going on the journey and you mightn't have enough, we bought far too much. And we got our first iterations out last year. Unfortunately, tonight we're not showing our first Pride, which is our 17-year-old. It sold out quite quickly over the winter. But the 17-year-old was a blend from G&D, as before. It wasn't a blend, sorry. It was a manufacturer, I'll call it, from G&D. It was a 17-year-old malt, laid for a year in rum casks. And it won double gold in Las Vegas, in San Francisco, and a gold in Los Angeles. And the second thing we did was this 10-year-old, which you have tonight, which was a 10-year-old grain with, Jarlath will give more description of it, but it's roughly 10% of it is that same 17-year-old malt. finished in a port cask. But the jars we'll go more into about the tasting of it and that. So we did quite well to get it got gold in San Francisco and silver in Las Vegas. But I think I was a bit surprised by that, but because I used to say to people before this, I am going by a bit of guru information I picked up from one of the world's whiskey gurus. And what he says in his book about marketing whiskey, he says, tell me your story and I will sell your whiskey. So I become more obsessed with the story than I did with the whiskey. And if you haven't already told people, one of the things that I produced a year ago is Matt Darcy and Old Newry Whiskies, which is my own composition. And it's the history of whiskies in Newry. But if you want to get deeper into understand about whiskey, I just don't mean what you hear on a tour, but how there was an actual trade war going on in the sense of silent spirit versus pot still and that. Being a historian, I went into all of that, but I also dug up some wonderful marketing stories from the past, because that's what we're going to need. We're going to need, as the guru told me 4 years ago, get yourself a story. Well, I sort of overdone it. Anyway, last year we started into marketing and we've done quite well. As Tim said, we put out a younger whiskey and called it Old Newry. It's like hotcakes within 15 miles of Newry. But after that, nobody's interested. So we put out another one called Darcy's, and it's going well in the north of Ireland and in the south. And we've shipped to Germany, and we've shipped to England, and we've shipped to France. And in the course of that year, it came to me again, Michael, you think you're going to start yet another business? I have about 5 businesses under my belt. Every one of them the same. I started off the way Tim was talking. I got myself 3 or 4 customers here and 3 or 4 customers there. And next year I had 8 customers, and the following year I had 20 customers. I said, wait a minute, I don't have time for this. And I don't have time for all this red tape. We want to send something to Germany. Whoa, you want to send something to Canada? It's a different set of regime. What I need a big spouse who already has connections in these markets. And I'm pretty good at picking up women of second wife. The day I met her, I told her I was going to marry her. And it's a wee bit like this with Jarlath. We just had one phone call with Jarlath, out of which she says, well, we better meet up with you fellas, because I'm so jealous of the fact that they had international markets already carved out. And I says, I know where I'm heading. I'm heading into partnership with somebody who who has all the red tape mastered. And that's where we've arrived at today, that we have 3 products that we have brought along nicely ourselves, but on merchant whiskey, like everybody else is starting up, but hasn't time to wait. That's what we did, but that was not what my inclination was at the beginning. It was my older brother that did that. And I know this sounds very facetious, but he died on me and he wasn't here to help me out. So I said, I need help. I can't keep doing this myself. And that's how we've ended up with the relationship today with them. But could I recommend anybody who really wants to know the inside story of the upside down of Irish whiskey? Look it up. I have it on eBay for sale at 12 quid. Right, Charlotte, it's now common sense instead of all that nonsense.
Charlotte, I'm excited to invite you to the show, but perhaps as well we should also fill our glasses as we go. So I'm going to take dram number 2, if we go here, and why don't you tell us about what we have in the glass first, and then perhaps the Ecklandville futures with Matt Darcy.
Yeah, all right. Hey, Matt. As of today, Matt Darcy comes under the umbrella of Ecklandville and joins Dunville's and an Old Crumber in our whiskey portfolio, which is a lovely, a nice. They work well together, very complementary, you know. So what we'll have here is a 10-year-old blend, finished in finished in it, well, probably matured in AB2s, second fill bourbons and AB1s, first fill bourbons. And then the grain element has been transferred into a first fill bourbon for 18 years to 2.5 years, just to get those lovely fresher floral, or those floral notes and those lovely fresh citrus notes into it. The malt element has spent a year in ruby port casks. It's a whiskey that I haven't tried much. As Michael has said, we've been sort of in courtship for 3 or 4 months. We've been really busy in those 3 or 4 months, so I haven't had a lot of time to spend on this whiskey. But whenever I do spend time on it, I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised. I mean, the whiskey has won, as Michael said, it won a gold medal at the San Fran World Whiskey Competition last 2020. You know what I mean? So it works. I poured one 5 minutes ago, and I poured one 25 minutes ago. But I always find with blended whiskies and grain-heavy whiskies that if you leave it in your glass for 25 minutes, you'll find the truth of it. You know, you'll find whether it's a lovely balanced whiskey where it all comes together, or whether that raw grain spirit will just come to the fore and take over everything. And certainly with this one, you know, I'd really recommend pouring this, leaving it 20 minutes, because after 20 minutes, you know, at the start in the nose, you're going to get those grain notes, those floral notes, those citrus notes, probably, you know, white fruits, apples and pears. It's 46%, it's non-chill filtered, and there's no caramel. So, you know, it's natural colour, which is something that Actonville does, and I'm glad to say that Matt Darcy's have done that before us. You know, 46% is our sweet spot, and certainly non-chill filtered, and no added caramel, natural coloured, you know. But yeah, on the nose, you're going to get those, you know, those whiter fruits. There's a real like jamminess to it, you know. It goes from marmalade, it goes from an orange marmalade into like almost like a dark berry compote, you know, over time. And certainly the glass that I poured half an hour ago, you know, those red wine port notes really sort of start to take over, and you get a lovely. And you know, Matt, like I always talk about balance in whiskey, and I always look for a balance in whiskey, and by that I mean, you know, to the cask balance in a blend, there's a constituents balance, but also there's a ABV, there's a spirit balance with the cask and with the influence and with, you know, the finish and all, you know, I mean, it's balanced overall. And certainly, you know, that something that whiskey has got, it is balanced, you know, and the longer you leave it in the glass, it gets a bit more, it turns more syrupy, you know, and that orange marmalade almost goes into like a dark berry compo, and you start to get, you know, the apples and pears turn to like poached pears and stewed apples, and maybe poached pears and red wine from the port cask, and then you start getting that nutmeg and clove are the two spices that come in, you know, at the finish, and yeah, you know, pour it, leave it 20 minutes, go back to it, and you'll find the truth of that whiskey, you know, and very pleasant indeed.
Absolutely. Now, on the nose, he said like those white fruits, the kind of that jamminess, like it's that kind of it's almost like the fruit jelly, fruit jam, like compote, as you said.
It turns to a compote after 5 or 10 minutes. It turns into a darker fruit compote, you know. But I mean, that's obviously that port craft influence, you know, is where those notes are coming from, you know.
Absolutely, and a lovely kind of that sweet, creamy caramel finish to it as well. That makes for a very delicious finish and moorish element to the whiskey. And if someone was to purchase a bottle of this, do you have a guide price of how much that might set you back?
Yeah, I mean, it's on Irish malts at the minute. I think it's sitting sort of mid-40s sterling for the bottle only. As you'll see to Michael's right or left, there's a lovely presentation box and a wooden plinth. I think that retails about 20 quid there, so that's probably mid-60s. And they're both on Irish malts.
Jonathan, when I heard them asking that question earlier, I jumped onto Irish malts and wrote down the answers.
I hope I'm not far away.
Well, no, what we call the naked bottle, i.e. the one that's outside of this double layer box. You know, this is giftware going mad. You have to open 3 doors to get into it. what we call that bottle on its own, we call it the Naked.
It's a ceremony getting into it.
Yeah, that's why it's a gift. It's a real gift. Yeah. Put 3 layers of paper around it and then let somebody get three doors to open to get into it. Yeah. Anyway, on the Irish malts, it's the Naked is €48.95 sterling and €54.95. And the beautiful box, etc., the same thing with its little plinth and its necktie and whatever else it has, is 69 sterling and €79.
I wasn't too far away, Matt, from my first day.
Oh no, you weren't. I just didn't want somebody to be ringing us up in the morning and say, Jared told us it was
X price and then the other. Well, so going forwards, Jarlath, that we're going to see Matt Darcy sitting alongside the Dunvilles and the Cumber brands from your portfolio, which I think we'll be excited to see going forwards. And I presume it'll be where one finds one of the brands will find availability of the other brands as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it'll take time to filter through the channels, and in fairness, we probably have to do a bit of redesign. Not on a 10-year-old, but maybe on the old old Matt Darcy's that entry level blend, and we did a bit of redesign on that. The 10-year-old's just perfect; it fits in our portfolio perfectly. So I guess we'll try and spend the next 2 or 3 months talking to our partners and seeing where the Matt Darcy's brands will fit in our wider offering, and then start putting it out. Obviously, production will move to Acklandville as of today. The stocks are in transit. I think the first stocks arrived today, so we can start putting some of that out sort of pretty quickly. It will take a while to settle down. Obviously we have Old Cumber and Dunville, so we're now sitting with 3 historic old County Down brands, and probably the 3 biggest, I would imagine. Shane just loves collecting old brands, And in fairness, I love working with him. Our designer Mark, who I think you might know, he's just got a knack for. He gets those old brands. It's Mark Thompson. He works with Acklandville and all our design work, and a passion of his is old whiskey brands and old Ulster whiskey brands. He does it. He does it, as you've seen with the return of Old Cumber. It's a bit subtle changes, Matt. It's about paying respect to the old brand, and any change, as we've done with Dunville's, any changes you do them gradually, do them complementary, and do them, that they and you'll be all right, and I guess that's where we'll go with Old Cumber, and that's where we'll go with Matt Darcy's. They will all be separate brands with a separate USP. Old Cumber will be the double distilled or triple distilled pot still. Dunville's will be very much malt led, but very much sherry finished malt led. Old craft sherry ports and rums. Old, and then Matt Darcy's will probably continue the conversation and just say, beyond the current portfolio, which is a 17-year, 18-year-old in rum, the 10-year-old with a port craft finish, and the 3-year-old or 4-year-old entry level blend, which is a light citrusy blend. Beyond that, then we'll start to look to doing some other releases, possibly similar craft releases and whatever else, and just see how it all ties in. But yeah, exactly. I mean, delighted to announce it today, obviously.
Well, congratulations to both of you. We are very much running out of time here, so I will say thank you so much to both of you giving us a fantastic introduction and I suppose new family introduction to the Acklandville and Matt Darcy range. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Very much appreciate your time.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Matt. Thank
you. So now I am delighted to be welcoming you all to our third and final whiskey of the evening. This is our the whiskey of the evening that is the global launch of this product, which is fantastic to be able to have another first look at a brand new product, which is Boann Distillery Whistler, the Good, the Bad, and the Smoky. And I am delighted to be joined by Michael Walsh, head distiller of Boann. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm very good. How are you?
I am absolutely fantastic. I'm very excited tonight's show has been a fantastic group of guests, and there's been so many different types of whiskies. And now, whether we've had a fantastic blended whiskey at 40%, we've had a 10-year-old blend at 46%, and now we have a type of blended whiskey which has absolutely no grain whiskey in it at all, which is the blended malt of the Good, the Bad, and the Smoky. Why don't you give us a little introduction into this bottle? I think I have a little shot of it here as well. So brand new bottle, a formal release here on 3 Drams. So it's fantastic to be able to release and launch a whiskey on the platform. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it? And I'll stop interrupting you.
Yeah, so you probably know as much, if not more, about this blend as I. For those that don't know, watching me and Matt work closely together at Boann Distillery during the day. But this is our latest, yes, like you said, a blend, but it's a blend of malts. So whereby a single malt would be a single malt distillate from one distillery. This is a combination of 3 single malts from 3 separate distilleries blended together. So it's still entirely malt, distilled through pot stills, but from, like I said, 3 different distilleries in combination. All matured in bourbon for in and about 5 years, and then finished in what was originally bourbon barrel, but bourbon barrels that got made down into quarter casks and then were used to mature peated whiskey for about 1 to 2 years before we then got our hands on them. So yeah, a quarter cask is literally that. It's actually quarter in size. It's bourbon barrels, which are 200 liters, but it's actually 100. They make down into 125 liter casks, which is actually called a quarter cask because it's a quarter of a barrique, which is 125 liters, or 225 liters, I should say, or 250 liters. Sorry, 250 liter hogsheads even. Sorry, my maths at this hour of the evening and a couple of drams in. But yeah, so we then mature this blend or this combination of single malts in that cask for just shy of a year, and the effect it has on the whiskey is.
Well, hang on, hold that there, because let's just invite everyone to, if you haven't already, I see some people coming through the tasting notes. Pour your glass, and then Michael, you tell us what the effect on the whiskey is.
Well, for many of your listeners, or probably have seen me, I think I've been on once or twice already on this show, and I've been on a couple of different live tastings. Just in future, for anybody, because I'm sure this won't be my last tasting. Maybe it's my last 3 Drams. I don't know. I'd be only too happy to be back if you'll have me. But if you ever see my ugly mug pop up on screen, start drinking whiskey immediately. It makes it a hell of a lot easier to put up with me. But yeah, so the effect that the year or so, well, shy of a year, has had in those peated quarter casks is a really smoky campfire kind of an effect, and taking inspiration from that dusty campfire embers effect it's had on the whiskey has led into the branding, and I wouldn't be. Look, I'm a distiller by trade. I'm blend obviously, and I've been doing that for almost a decade now. So I'm more focused on what goes into the liquid as opposed to the pretty stuff that goes on the bottle and whatever else. That's more your job, Matt. But I will. Maybe it's because I grew up a big fan of westerns or whatever else. I'm very impressed by the quality of all of our branding is fairly good. But particularly the Good, the Bad, and the Smoky is obviously a play on words on the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly being a western. And yeah, so that whole idea of that dusty campfire western and all that side of things. So so we want to get into the distillate before I get into more the branding side.
Yeah, sure. We'll have a little, if we fill the glass, a little slancha, have a little nose. So you said a blend of 3 different malt whiskies finished in peated quarter casks.
Yeah, and it's I just probably should have mentioned before anyone started starting to drink it. It's at a slightly higher strength than standard release, which it's at 48% alcohol. That's a slight nod. Well, normally we would release maybe at 46 because we non-chill filter our whiskies, but this is slightly higher in a nod to the distillery where we source the casks from, which I'm not allowed to mention because of non-disclosure agreements, but anybody who likes peated whiskey may be aware there's not too many that do peated quarter casks. And so, but yeah, that they also cask at, our bottle, I should say, at 48. So that's a slight nod to those guys as well. So it is a slightly higher ABV. So yeah, on the palate, you obviously, I think you get that peated character, you get that smoky character, but for me, it is just like that. It's like having a whiskey, or like when you're having food or anything and you're sitting by a bonfire, especially evenings like this now, if anybody's getting out for a bit of camping or anything like that, you'll know the effect if you sit around a campfire. It gets into your clothes, gets into everything else. It's not as dominant an effect or as a straight up peated whiskey, but you have that subtle smoke. But you still get that shining through of those sweet caramels, vanilla and honey, kind of the notes that you would expect from a bourbon matured Irish single malt.
Matt from Dram Fine Whiskey said he saved some of this for the barbecue on the weekend, and I think that's a fantastic call. I think this would definitely be something that would go well with some braised ribs or maybe some brisket. Actually, haven't had brisket in a long time. That would go along very nicely.
Yeah, look, there's something especially as much as peated whiskey is probably pushed into the category of being like damp winter dark room kind of whiskey. Yeah, I was only yesterday evening. I brought the dog for a walk on the beach, and as I was getting back into the car, somebody was barbecuing sausages and hot dogs or something that I could smell. Just even the smell of the smoke, I had to come home. There's something obviously, I don't know, it's a primal or whatever else. That smell of smoke is a beautiful effect. Of course, the way the Scottish do it, where they peat their malt, and some Irish distilleries, I think Jarlath does a bit of peated malt, absolutely ruins the whiskey, but we've actually done a great job here by not peating the grains themselves. No, I jest, but yeah, there's that nice subtle, subtle smoke that will go excellently with a barbecue. I agree with your listener there.
Fushka Kev saying he loves the Irish twist and peated whiskies, light, fruity and sweet. And I think what would you say, in terms of using the peated casks instead of the peated barley itself, do in terms of differing the levels of peat in the final product? Look, if I'm going to be if I'm going to be critical on peat, sometimes I feel like it can drown out maybe a lot of the character of a good single malt, and it can be obviously the most dominant and absolutely predominant characteristic is it presents itself in different fashions. It can be quite medicinal, it can be quite saline or kind of a seaweedy effect, or you can have it quite like a herbal smoke. This is more, like I said, a campfire kind of a smoke, that effect that's been in here, but it's more towards the background and having to stand up to three very delicious single malt Irish whiskies. So your triple distilled Irish single malt tends to be that little bit sweeter and more well-rounded and suited in a way, although maybe it's not the sexiest of cask types to use bourbons, but a good quality first fill bourbon in combination with a triple distilled malt will give a lovely intensification of that honey, those vanillas, those sweetness, and then just layering in that extra little complexity with the smoke, I think has actually turned out to be a beautiful dram. I wouldn't be the biggest proponent of peat, but I've very much enjoyed this whiskey. Well, Mike D's dropped into the comments saying he's guessing you don't like your Lafroig, but I do spot a bottle over your shoulder. So I'd say he might be wrong in that estimation.
Yeah, no. My first love is well, any form of Irish whiskey, or whether you're your pot still, your single malt, or even your grains and blends, but and very much second fiddle to that would be Scotch and peated Scotch. But it has its uses. It can have a Lefroy can even have a wonderful effect, and they do. This is actually a Lefroy quarter cask bottling I have behind me. But it can have a wonderful impact on a cask that can have its uses for maturation of Irish whiskey. But,
and there is a question here from Joseph Green who's saying, how do you peat a barrel? So possibly that leads into explaining that a little bit more. Yeah,
so it's such a dominant flavor profile. The way the peat character is infused into the whiskey is they actually smoke the grains while drying the malt. They use peat to do that, and the peat perforates the grain, and that character will actually follow through the brewing process, through the fermentation process, through the distillation process, and even through long maturations, and still be the most dominant characteristic. So if you ever work in a peated distillery, your clothes, your skin, your whole, you stink of the stuff. If anybody stood around the campfire, peat smoke, if you're inside in an old, like a lot of our listeners maybe familiar with an old turf fire, if you go too close to it, it will stick to you, the smell, and it will also stick to or embed itself. No different to how sherry will embed itself into the a sherry cask or rum into a rum cask. Peat and peated single malt effect will embed itself into a cask as well. So none of the whiskey is in any way peated. It's all of this peated or smoke character is being pulled from the cask, from its previous use.
From the cask itself. Now, there was a question asking about the price of this bottle. I looked up there on Irish malts. I believe it's $54.95 in euros. I don't have access to the UK side to see the punts variant, but as per UK pounds, it's usually lower, about £5-ish, at least in denomination. So probably around the £49 mark. But I'm sure John from Irish Malts will be able to put all of that information into the email there. Were there any tricks or challenges working with peated casks, unlike other casks you've worked with before?
Maybe not necessarily the peated cask. These casks were, like I said, quarter casks. So the quarter cask creates a higher level of wood to liquid. The wood to liquid ratio is higher, so they tend to have a more predominant effect and a quicker maturation, because it's a smaller, like I said, smaller casks mean quicker maturations and quicker effects. So we just had to pay a little bit of attention and monitor it as it went. But no, it's certainly an effect, a peated character. If not, in my opinion, you can overdo it. Maybe by certain people's palates, they disagree, but this is on the subtle side. I see someone as well had mentioned about water. Yeah, this is a whiskey. You add water to whiskey for two different reasons. One, the most obvious reason, is to dilute the ABV. The second is even a tiniest drop to certain whiskeys will open them up. I could go into the boring science, but I won't. But for certain whiskies, particularly sometimes oily pot stills, if you just add a tiny drop of water, you'll find an opening up of flavors, and sometimes you'll have that as well with fortified wines. For this, because it's a bourbon cask and the peat character, you don't have an opening up of flavors. You might it doesn't have that same effect. It's not as oily. It's not going to open up the same way. But of course, if you would need to dilute it to bring it to a more approachable ABV, but it is one that I played around with water this evening, and previously it doesn't. The flavors don't open up to something completely different, which you can have sometimes with different whiskies. But by all means, play around with it yourself and see if you do find it improves with adding a little drop.
So I know from my insider point of view that the casks used for this, there was white label Lefroy quarter casks or peated quarter casks, and there was the yellow labels, and the yellow label being discouraged at 3 years old, and the white label is discouraged at 5. And as you know, peated whiskies mature, they lose some of that peat element. Did you find an interesting time in the blending of the whiskeys with the different effects from the casks, or were they very kind of homogenous between the 3 and 5 year old casks? Now, I say that as the cask that held peated whiskey are those ages, rather than the ages of the 3 malts you put in, because as you mentioned earlier, they were 5 and 6 year old malts, but the casks themselves had held peated whiskey for 3 or 5 years, depending on the color of the ticket.
I'm laughing because you said they were in a fry, and it was you that told me that we're not allowed to say that we're matured in a fry casks. But yeah, it might lose. Peat can lose some of its character as it matures, but a lot of it loses it into the wood. So yeah, we found. It's from a lesson that I might have learned as well from maturing in non-oak varieties or certain cask types, where you might have an age or a time frame in mind. You'd be like, yeah, we put it into the cask for a year, which would be a nice number to present at a talk like this. Yeah, we put it in for a year, but yeah, we just found that that up around the 10 months, it got to a place where we wanted to be. It was starting to plateau, and maybe there was a fear as well that it might start to lose some of that character of that as far as we were concerned. It was at that sweet spot. It was that campfire ember effect, that layering on that we wanted to achieve. And we didn't want to go want it to go any further, but equally we didn't want it to lose any of that character. So yeah, no, it's always a balancing act. I always like to keep a very close eye on whiskies as they mature, which is code for I like to drink from the casks as often as I can over the course of their life. So so it's a labor of love. We weren't shy about taking samples from these casks as they were maturing.
Oh, fantastic casks. John Cummings asking if there's discounts to buy all 3 together. Of course, John will be dropping an email into your inbox with any discounts, any and all discounts or deals or whatever happens to be this month's 3 Drams deal with Irish malts. And he'll have that straight into your inbox either already or just at the end of the show. And Michael, do you want to give us another look at the bottle itself? As John said at the start of the show, a smoked bottle.
Yeah, I would like to, and like I said at the start, I don't necessarily tend to get caught up too much on the marking. My lighting's not doing it justice. It's an absolutely beautiful bottle, but it is like a dusty kind of smoky effect. Even the bottle itself, the glass is frosted glass, but it has references to the movie. If you're geeky like Matt is about little things like that, about puns or like tying it back, there's so many references to, and I've actually learned so much. I love this movie as a young fella, and I used to get a little fucking Colt 45 every when I used to go up and visit my gran in Dublin. We go into Smith's and I get a Colt 45 every year. But there's so much more. There's little things like spaghetti westerns. I didn't know where that came from. The Good and Bad, the Ugly. Westerns tended to be directed by Italian directors, so the actual original name of the movie is El Bueno. I'm going to murder this. El Bueno, El Puerto, and El Cattivo. So like there's little references to that. It's El Bueno, El Puerto, El Fumoso, which is the good, the bad, the smoky. Every gun makes its own tune. Again, reference. We would normally have on the top of our Whistler bottles making a tie back to the whistling aspect of our tune. It's sit and whistle a while. Where am I going? There we go. But this has there you have. Every gun makes its own tune. We tried to, all of our corks would have a tune on the cork. We tried to get that classic, the good, the bad, the ugly theme tune on the cork, but our marketing department isn't as good as I would like to give them credit for. And so they weren't able to get that, but it's on the back. It's on the back here in lovely reflective foil as well. Yeah, it's just it's a top class package around it. If there's so many other references that I wish I could remember from when you told me. There's like a little match strike at the back. I think Peter, our colleague, wanted to put a safety match and a
non-safety match.
Yeah, so that, like, because obviously Clint Eastwood's character, the man with no name, which is also referenced on the front, he's constantly striking a match and lighting up a cigar. But we probably did. I'm 10 years into this industry, and I probably hopefully have many more years ahead of me, and I want to have some form of legacy, which isn't the one where isn't that your man who put a safety match and the cigar in with the bottle of whiskeys that all went up in flames. So we decided to not put the safety match with the bottle, but it does have that flint at the back. So if you do have a safety match at home and you're striking a cigar, you can do off the back of the bottle. There's a hell of a lot more references that you'll find across it. It's just a beautiful package. And the movie, which I was delighted to find, is on YouTube in incredibly high definition, considering it was in 1966. And I haven't watched it since I was like 10 years old or something, and it's still class. The cinematography is unbelievable. It's a top class movie, and I'm delighted that we're able to pay some sort of homage with a half decent, if you don't mind me saying, whiskey here. So whether it's at a barbecue or whether it's sitting back and relaxing now that they won't let us go into the pubs for another couple of weeks and you need something to pass away the evening. If the weather turns next week, I can't recommend enough to throw on the Good, the Bad and the Smoky. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, and drink a drop of the Good, the Bad and the Ugly. The movie's about 3 hours long, so you'll have to buy a bottle of John, and the sample, whatever's left in your 3 gram sample, won't be enough. So buy a bottle on Irish malts and tuck in for the evening.
And I see Justin Barber's dropped in here to say there's a typo and it should be Smoky with an E. And while we love debating the E and no E in Irish whiskey, Smoky with the E is the name of the bear from the States. Smoky the bear tells people not to set forest fires, but Smoky without the E.
Yeah, are you going to say that there's some like trademark issues after you've told people to fry when we're specifically like not allowed to? And there's surely some trademark issues around the Good, the Bad, and everything else we put on. We're hardly going to get in trouble for Smoky the bear. But let's see.
Look, well, Michael, thank you so much for your introduction, and of course the global launch and release of the Good, the Bad, and the Smoky, which you will be able to find on Boann Distillery's web store, and of course Irish Malts as well. John has let me know that the email of for the end of the show hasn't gone out yet, so keep an eye in your inboxes as we finish up. And as always, I'm going to say, Michael, to you, thank you so much, and I hope you've had a good time with us on the show.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be on 3 Drams, and thanks again for having me on.
Exact, no problem. The Good, the Bad, and the Smoky blended malt, 48% ABV and $54.95 in irishmalts.com. So thank you everyone who's been watching and either watching live or watching along after the fact. It's been a fantastically sunny evening here in Dublin. I know we're having great weather across Ireland. As we said in the beginning, lovely that hearing other parts of the world aren't having great weather, because it's not usual that we're the ones that have the nice one. But fantastic to see so many people dropping in with some fantastic questions. We've had some great discussions and characters and conversations throughout the evening. So many fantastic people dropping in from all over the world. We've had Belgium, Germany, the US. We've had the sunny Southeast. We've had people as far away as Sweden. And I know there's one of our friends in Japan tunes in every month as well. But let us know in the comments section what were your favorite whiskeys of the evenings. Give them a little your rating of whether it's 1, 2, or 3 is your favorite. Because of course, every week and every month it's a different scenario. Everyone has subjective flavors, and it's fantastic to see what your favorites are. John from Irish Malt and 3 Drams has sent out that email, so keep an eye in your email inbox for all the fantastic news and details about these whiskies. But to everyone who's watching, I say a very big thank you to you, to the O'Donovan brothers who run, own, founded, and push Irish Malts and 3 Drams into the stratosphere of fantastic content for Irish whiskey. A big thank you to those guys as well. And then, of course, to Tim McKee from Copeland Distillery, who was able to bring us through his fantastic Merchant's Key blended whiskey. A big thank you to him. And to the stellar tag team between Michael McKeown from Matt Darcy Whiskey and Jarlath Watson from Ecklandville Distillery, who are now partners in crime, I shall say, but in producing some fantastic County Down whiskies. Thank you both to them. You can find the Matt Darcy 10-year-old port finish again on Irish malts if you just have a quick look into your email inbox. And then finally, of course, head distiller Michael Walsh, Michael Brannock from Boann Distillery, who's able to bring us through the Whistler, the Good, the Bad, and the Smoky. To everyone who's been watching, thank you so much. Keep those ratings coming through. What was your favorite whiskey of the night? It's always fantastic for us. For sheer shits and giggles, as we say, everyone has a subjective palate, so it's great to see what you've really enjoyed. And if there are any major things in the whiskey world you want to see covered, make sure to bombard John because he loves emails. But it's always great to know what people love and want to see coming up. I know that episode 9 has already pretty much been finalized. It's going to be an absolutely, I'm pretty sure, a really stellar lineup for next month. So keep an eye on your email inbox. Because there's going to be some fantastic, not only whiskies, but also some returning faces and some brand new faces to the world of 3 Drams and Irish whiskey. So, guys, to everyone, and I hope you have a lovely evening. So, Slán.